Hi, I'm Suzanne Turner, and welcome to a podcast delving into the personal narratives within the clinical research industry. Through candid interviews, we'll learn about the personal journeys and motivations of individuals who have chosen this profession, what I like to call their why. This podcast is not just for industry insiders. It's for everyone curious about the human side of healthcare. Beyond the industry's negative reputation, we'll shed light on the dedicated professionals behind clinical trials. Join us as we uncover the heart and passion of those working tirelessly behind the scenes in clinical research. Welcome to Heart of the Trial. Hello, lovely listeners. I'm your host, Suzanne Turner, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to Heart of the Trial, where we uncover the human stories within clinical research and shed a positive light on the pharmaceutical industry. Today, we are going to be discussing clinical operations with our guest, Kristen Perkins. She has over 16 years of experience in the industry and is the founder of the Clinical Trial Manager. So welcome to the show, Kristen.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and jump in. Why don't we start by talking about what your role is in clinical research and how that connects to the big picture?
Sure. So currently I am a senior director of clinical operations, but I started out on the site side of things. And so I was a research assistant, then a clinical research coordinator. Then I made my way to the CRO side, was a clinical trial associate, in-house CRA, and then I made my way to the sponsor side and worked my way up in clinical operations that way.
You've touched everything. You've touched everything.
I've done it all. Yeah. So currently I provide leadership for clinical trials and oversee our internal and external teams to deliver towards our corporate goals.
That's amazing. So you said you started out at the sites. So how did you get into it? How did you fall into this business and then move from that site all the way up to where you are now? Tell us about that.
Yeah. And I love how you've said on other episodes about like when you're in college, like this isn't a job that you see advertised.
No.
So that was the case for me. I was a psych undergrad. I had the opportunity to do a bunch of internships in college, and I learned very quickly I did not want to be in psych, which is great that you learn that in undergrad and not in your
thank
job.
Goodness. Yes.
Yeah, but my junior year, I took a research course, and that is what opened up my eyes to this whole industry. I had no idea that this was even a thing. So when I was job searching after graduation, I realized that I just wanted to get my foot in the door somewhere. And so becoming a research assistant was the easiest way to do that. And I started at one of the Ivy League schools in our country. And then I moved over to one of the leading medical institutions in our country. So I really had an amazing opportunity to learn from these like top doctors, top leaders, cutting edge science, and just soaked it all up like a sponge.
That's amazing. And was that when you were, is that when you started working at the sites? So you were not like a clinical research coordinator. You were just part of the actual day-to-day running of the treating the patients, that type of thing.
Yeah, as a research assistant, I basically did everything anyone ever told me to do. But then when I worked my way up to being a clinical research coordinator, that was when I became a little more specialized. That was when I got exposed to phase 3 research. I started interacting with CROs and sponsors. And I realized I was really passionate about working directly with the patients as well as just the industry in general. At the same time, my grandmother had died from cancer. And so I just found a new purpose for my career. And I was working in oncology at that time. And I realized how just amazing it was that my grandmother had choices in her care. And that was all because patients before her had contributed to this important research. And so, I realized in that moment, I wanted to have a little more say in the outcome of these trials. I had learned enough being on the site side, and I was really ready to, implement the goals and understand why they were why we were doing the research we were doing. I wanted to get on the next, side of things.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. So that's your why for why you do this is because you've been personally impacted by it, and you see how much good can come out of it, and the sacrifice that these patients make by participating. Like they can benefit from it, but they're helping those in the future.
Absolutely. And to this day, patient-focused drug development is not just a buzzword. It is why we show up and do our jobs. And it all comes down to the patient. The patient is everything. And, I think what's really important is that patients have choice. And I know one of the ways the industry gets a bad reputation is by people thinking that it's just pushing drugs on patients rather than actually trying to heal patients at the root of whatever the diagnosis is. And I can see how that can be the perception. And in my experience, I've worked with some of the most brilliant, kind-hearted people that truly want patients to be healthy and don't want to keep them in a cycle of sickness. And so I think holistic healthcare is really important, where you're looking at why patients are sick, you're addressing diet and exercise and lifestyle factors, while in parallel figuring out if that alone can't support patients to, work towards whatever they're working towards, then there is a role that, having access to treatments might help patients as well. So I just think it's just so important, going back to what you've said in past episodes of the reputation of the industry. I think there's so much good that can come out of that. And there's so much work to be done because it's not just about trying to get more drugs on the market. I think that's really destructive to think about it like that, and to not in parallel think about why are patients getting sick? How do we actually prevent them from getting sick? In addition to, if they do get sick, they get a diagnosis, they have choices so that they can get healthy again.
I love that. And I'm hoping in the future to be able to maybe bring on some experts to talk about the more holistic side, because I'm in agreement with you completely that I do a lot of things that other people probably would not consider to be medically important, but to me it is. I get a monthly massage, I go to the chiropractor every week, and I've actually seen the improvement in my body just by these more natural things than having to have some medicines, but they're available if I need them. But so it's helped with my lower back pain issues and everything. So I absolutely love that topic. And I hope that it becomes a bigger discussion in general, right? As these trials happen in the future and all, that it's something taken into consideration. So I just absolutely love that.
Absolutely. And it bridges the extremes, right? It bridges maybe the people out there that see the industry as bad, and it bridges, maybe even those bad apples out there that are truly focused on profit over people. It kind of brings it all together, which is the majority of us are somewhere in the middle. And we all, if either ourselves or a loved one gets diagnosed with cancer, I mean, yes, ideally there's lifestyle factors that you change, and in a perfect world that would address the issue. In my experience, that hasn't been the case. And so it would be nice for people to have options that they can explore with highly qualified physicians that also believe in holistic healthcare, so that they can have better outcomes. So I'd love to hear more. As you grow this podcast, I'd be very curious about
that's definitely a goal. Okay, so you went from the site to looking into the clinical research coordinator position, so you're getting more involved, and then so you at some point then make the jump from there into what, a CRO?
into the CRO. Yes. So from there, I joined like one of the top CRO companies as a clinical trial associate, really working closely with the TMF, which I know is, your specialty, which honestly, it was a paper TMF and it was very painful.
The number of paper cuts.
But the amount I learned by having to review all those documents, you wouldn't imagine how much that sets you up to like actually understand why the trials are run the way they are. Having to go through all this, IVRS technology stuff. Like, why would you have to review that? Well, you have to make sure everything's there, that everything matches up. And then you start asking really different questions about like, why do you do it that way? And then you start engaging with your manager and you start piecing it together. And that's what I was doing. I took a contract position for that CTA role in San Diego. So I'm based in Greater Boston. I was looking for a change. I went out to San Diego and I met my husband and we moved back to the Greater Boston area together. So that's another story. But when I made that change back, there was an opportunity to move into an in-house CRA role in the Boston area. And so I thought that is what's next for me because I really want to start applying everything I just learned in my, CTA role in a really different way. I want to start working more directly with sponsors. I want to start developing a different skill set. And so that's where I moved into an in-house CRA role, which was really basically remote monitoring. And so working on a variety of studies and reviewing data, working with sites, preparing for any sort of data cuts, data locks, and then liaising with the on-site monitors so that we were like a unified team. Right. And so it was a really great experience, but at large CROs, often you are kind of put in a box. And I love wearing many hats. I love learning a lot. And I found really quickly that I was pretty restricted by the number of years of experience I had or the opportunities that were available to me. And I just thought, I am not going to get stuck waiting for the years to tick by, waiting for someone to leave their role so I can step into their position. I care too deeply about this. So that was when I was like, maybe I can move to the sponsor side. And so that was when I made the transition over to the sponsor side. I was a little worried because I did have to like take a step back and take the clinical trial associate role to go into the sponsor side, which it was like a step back, but it was actually a huge increase in pay because it just looked really different on the sponsor side. So that was what helped me make that leap. But I'm so grateful that I did, and it was the right fit for me. It was a small to mid-sized biotech company of about 100 people at that time. And so the opportunities were endless. And I just, focused on what I wanted to learn, and the raises and promotions followed. And I quickly grew into a clinical trial manager role, which is really, when the leadership within clinical operations began for me.
I love so many of the things that you're talking about here, because I think it shows a bunch of different sides. Like one, like you're talking about, the in-house CRA and the CRA, like working together as a team. And I love how you said that because I that's kind of how I think of it too. The CRA is the one with their foot on the ground. They're doing the traveling, they're going to these sites. And then the in-house CRA is the one there to kind of back them up and be that contact throughout the rest of the time and supporting them. And I just love how, talking about all these different roles, you're just showing the variety to the listeners, right? Yes. There are so many different types of roles: a CTA, an in-house CRA, a CRA, and clinical manager. And the fact that also it's on both sides, right? Because you have that in a CRO environment, and then you have that on the sponsor side. And I just think it's so cool to show how much really is out there, and all of the pieces are necessary, right? Like we've kind of talked about, like it's all necessary and it all works together. So that's so amazing. Okay, so you get yourself into a clinical manager position, and then what from there? Because since then you're now director.
Yeah. So I'm a senior director now. And so, yeah, the path over the last, I'd say 8 years has been um,
Yeah.
incredible in so many amazing ways, and so hard because while there's a lot of formal training out there where you can take a course on like how to manage trial budgets, or the fundamentals of a clinical project manager
Yeah.
role, which is similar to a clinical trial manager. There wasn't a program or a
Mm-hmm.
person that was like supporting me that I could be really
Yeah.
candid with in like a
Right.
mentor
Right. We all need
role.
that.
There
Mm-hmm.
wasn't. Yeah, we all need that. And so I found I hit a lot of bumps along the way that I think many people
Mm-hmm.
probably hit, that would have been avoided, and I could have made my life a little bit easier if I had more support along the
Yeah.
way. But basically, I was really clear on I wanted to be leading a clinical trial
Mm-hmm.
independently, ideally a phase 3
Mm-hmm.
trial, because I knew that was also a really great resume
Yes.
builder and would provide me with some job security. Because the one thing in our industry is, people get like companies get acquired
Yes.
all the time. There's layoffs, like these things happen. And I learned really quickly that like I am my best
Yes.
asset. Like I am my lottery ticket,
Yes.
right? So if I invest in myself and I figure this stuff out, I'm going to be
Yes.
just fine. I'm going to find a job. I'm going to have a great network of people. Um, and so that was what I got really focused on. And so I said yes to a lot of things. I worked on a lot of side projects in my department, and I moved up pretty quickly to be independently leading trials, where, now I'm working on like
Right.
programs with over up to 30 different
Right.
countries on a certain trial, thousands of patients, working towards an NDA
Whoa,
submission.
that's
Like that was
amazing.
everything I had hoped for. Yeah. And it's very funny. I look back, I've always been big on writing goals and measuring those goals. And I look back to goals I set about 12 years ago. And I wrote down the titles that I wanted, and I wrote down like the things I wanted to learn. And it's just so cool to see how much of that
Oh
has
my
happened,
gosh.
but also how much is out of your own control,
Yeah.
right? So you can focus on what you can control, and kind of surround yourself with the right people to support you along the way. And that's really what has helped me, grow into this senior director
That is
role.
amazing. And from that, like you've now founded your own company that focuses on this. You're taking all that experience and knowledge and all the road bumps that you suffered through, and now
Yeah.
you've created your own company to help others um, who who are going through the same experience, pretty much, right? Tell me about
Exactly.
it's the clinical trial manager. Tell me about it.
The clinical trial manager, yes. And so, yeah, I basically had this moment earlier this year in
Yeah.
2024 where I was like, I know that I need to be sharing everything I've
Mm-hmm.
learned. And I've been mentoring people for years informally, but I feel like that model of like one-to-one mentoring wasn't quite the way I would have the best
Right.
impact for
Right.
people. Um, I had this moment where I had this like download about what this program would look like, what I'd want to teach people. And so earlier this year, I kind of did like a beta
Yeah.
launch, working one-to-one with some people, and implementing this program and getting some really candid feedback from them. And it was amazing. There are such brilliant
Yes.
people out there that are so excited to grow into a clinical trial manager role. And they're facing challenges like their manager doesn't think they're
Oh.
ready. They're not getting feedback.
Uh-huh.
And so they don't know what they need to be working on. They've been stuck at their level for 3 to 5 years. They're not getting any more than their 1 to 3% of a
Yeah.
raise. They can't figure out why they're not chosen for the next best
Oh.
study. So it's stuff where people feel like they're in a hamster
Yes.
wheel. They feel like they're giving their all
Mm-hmm.
every single day, and that they're not being seen or appreciated by
Oh
their
my
leadership.
gosh.
And
That
so
happens all the time in this industry. It does. I'm
yes.
sure it happens in every
And it's
industry,
happened
but
to
yeah.
me.
Yes, I know. I'm
Yes.
sympathizing so much. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, because we've been there. It's, oh my gosh.
Exactly. And so I share like with these clients that I had earlier this year, like, I mean, I am the perfect person to support them because I've been through it. So like I found out I was working my tail off as a clinical trial manager, and I have no shame having informal conversations with colleagues, doing market research on what people are getting
Yeah.
paid, and obviously like appropriately, but like by building relationships based on trust, like I put it out there what I'm making and I open it up if people want to share that with me. And what I found was that I was severely underpaid in my role by about $20,000,
Oh my
and
gosh.
by with someone at my same company. And so it took me 6 months of advocating for myself, but I got the raise that
Oh
I
my
wanted, and
gosh.
I got even more than that. And so there's a number of different stories that I have about like those roadblocks of like in that moment, I didn't have anyone to go to. There wasn't a program like the clinical trial manager out there. It was just me leaning on my manager, who at the time was amazing, but she was limited by what she could do to further. I mean, she believed in me, but like she didn't make the decisions about, you know, those types of promotions and stuff. So I feel like if there was a little more of a playbook for me of like, okay, if this, then that, and this is how you stick with it. And this is a script you can use so that you make sure you're using the right language when you're asking for something. All of these things are like exactly why I founded this, because I want people to really step into their potential. We need this role in the industry. The clinical trial manager is a critical role where we are leading. We are like the glue of all internal and external functions to make sure the study is successful in as much as is in our control. So we can't control the outcome of a clinical trial, obviously, but we can control the operational aspects. We can make sure the internal and external teams are set up for success so that we are working towards our milestones, that we're keeping the trial within budget, we're accelerating timelines any way we can, and that it's the highest quality possible. And so that is what I want to help people to hone in on those skills so that they can be high performers. They can make money that they're proud of. They can have the title that they're working towards. They can feel respected wherever they are, and that they can feel job security. This is someone I worked with earlier this year. It was like laid off from her role. And she's like, I care so much about job security. And when she came into the program with me, to her, that meant not ever getting laid off. And I was like, look, that's out of your control. You can't control who lays you off. You can control how quickly you can find another job, though, by having a really strong market, having marketable skills that are so translatable, and that you have the confidence to speak to that. That's job security. It's not making sure you never get laid off. And so this is like what I'm working. So anyways, I've since the beginning of 2024, I worked in a really small container of a few clients to really hone in on this program. And right now I'm working on relaunching the program this fall, so that it'll be group coaching, so that there'll be more networking opportunities. I'll also have an online course where people who are looking for a little more DIY, that they already have a strong network, they have a mentor, and they're just looking for the education. That'll be perfect for those people. But for the people that are like, I'm ready to accelerate, like I know what I want, I've hit some roadblocks, I just need to figure out how to get there. Like I'm going to create a really amazing space for those people. And it's everything I always wished that I had.
It sounds incredible listening to you. It really does. Because I've been in really similar situations, and I love knowing you had a manager that was so supporting you, because having been on the other side of that, having been a manager who had individuals reporting to them that were amazing, and knowing that you can advocate for them as much as possible, but you don't get to make those decisions, it is heartbreaking from that side of it. So I'm sure your manager really was trying to do just everything possible, because I can tell, like having the few conversations we've had and listening to your program, that you are very good at what you do, and you're very passionate about what you do. So not getting recognized for that. And when you hear a gap like $20,000 different, that's mind-blowing and ridiculous. I mean,
exactly. And that is why we have to know what fair market value is for our job. It doesn't matter what your role is, because I know you're going to attract a lot of people to this podcast that have diverse roles, whether they're like me, who started at the site side, whether they're on the CRO side, whether they're on the sponsor side, whether they're not in the industry yet, and they're just like dipping their toe in through your content. It is so important that we all know what our job salary range is, because if we don't know, then we don't know how to advocate. And I would say, to start, you have to have a network of people that you trust, that you can bounce ideas off of. If you go online, you can find things on, salary.com. LinkedIn has some salary information now, which is amazing. But where I would recommend, you can start there. Where I would recommend is the difference when you're a high performer in your role, or you're just the standard. There is a big difference there. And that was what I learned. That $20,000 was within range. I wasn't technically outside of the expected range. I was at the very, very bottom of that range. And I had been stuck there for too long, despite my performance and my, I achieved all the goals I needed to. I went above and beyond. I worked on all these initiatives. It was like no one looked, or if they did, they weren't advocating for me. So I want to assume good intent. I always assume good intent. I just assume that someone didn't notice. And I couldn't notice until I had the conversation. So having a network of people you trust, where, salary isn't the only part of the conversation, but it's one of those things. Like, in another job, I received a percentage of my bonus that I get. And I was like, I don't know if this is normal. Like, is this typical? So I asked a few colleagues that have the same job title as me, and they were like, yeah, they validated it was standard. This is what they have. And it was like, okay, good. I feel good. I know, because you can't find that stuff online. And so this is just really important. So you know what to focus on, you feel valued, you know what the standards are. And also, like, I did that back when I was at the site side and the CRO side. And what I learned there is that I was giving so much of myself in those roles, and I was making pennies. And unfortunately, that's a lot of how this system works, where, the site staff, unless you're in a leadership role, often those clinical research coordinators, I mean, I was making $35,000 a year. I could barely cover my rent living in Boston, let alone paying back my student loans and like having any sort of life outside of work. It's impossible. So if you're armed with the information and you know what the industry looks like, you can do what you have to do for a defined period of time as you work towards other goals. And that's what got me to the next step. Was I was very clear on what I wanted and what was possible based on what was out there.
I think that's so amazing. And I think what's really important for hopefully some listeners take away from this is advocating for yourself. You should always be your biggest advocate, and not just in work related, from as a patient, when you're going to the doctors, you need to advocate for yourself, really in any situation. And it can be scary and it can be hard. I actually experienced this myself, because when back in, I think it's coming up 3 years now. So 2021, I got COVID and I was hospitalized for 10 days. And it was very, very, very bad. I didn't actually realize how bad it was and how close I came to not making it, until after I got out of the oxygen brain haze. But a couple of days in, I had an amazing nurse who said some things to me that gave me some motivation. And then I started advocating for myself and pushing. And because I didn't feel like, in the craziness of COVID that was going on, that they were trying to get me out of there. And so I had to start advocating for myself. What do I need to do? What oxygen numbers do I need to hit to get out of here? What You know what I mean? And so it's not just in work and saying I'm good at what I do and I deserve to be equally paid for that. But so many stories of, especially women going to the doctor and saying there's something wrong and being told, oh, just lose weight, like you have to advocate for yourself in these situations because you are your biggest advocate. You really are. And maybe, maybe what we need is my sister's amazing at this type of stuff. And she should start a business that's just help you advocate. You know what I mean? So like when this happens, you have someone you can call, like, help me advocate for myself. Like, because we all know some people are very shy or it's hard to speak up. But I love how you're talking about that because you have to advocate.
You have to. And I agree. I love that you loop in the patient piece, because while I believe so deeply in the importance of clinical research, obviously, I mean, I personally, I found lumps on my thyroid a few years ago, and I came to find out that I had to get my thyroid removed because I had a chance of it being cancerous, and it wasn't, luckily. But now I'm on a thyroid med for the rest of my life because I don't have the ability to produce the hormones on my own. And so if clinical trials didn't happen, what would I do? Right. Like I totally believe in the importance of this. And that's why that holistic piece is really important. But my daughter, who is now 1.5, she was sick when she was 6 months old at Boston Children's. And so I went in and I was doing all these different testing and stuff. And I had a clinical research coordinator come into the room and try to get her to enroll, or get me to enroll her in a long-term research study. And I was in that role when I was a clinical research coordinator. I also did long-term research studies. And so I know how that works. And so I would just recommend, before you agree, you understand it. Oftentimes informed consent forms are up to 20 pages long. Take your time, because it is very difficult to chase down. It can be difficult to chase down the right people if you decide you no longer want to participate in that research. And typically they can keep all the data that they have up until the point when you withdraw your consent. It varies based on the regulatory approvals and things like that. But because I know what I know, and because my daughter's condition was acute, that was not the right choice for us to be in a long-term follow-up study. And so I had information that made that choice really clear for me, even though I believe deeply in research. So it's like, always understand. And if you don't agree to something until you speak with someone that can explain it to you in a way that you understand it. That way, when you're committing to something, you can fully step into that and be comfortable no matter the outcome of it.
Oh my gosh. I love that. The similar thing. So my dad was diagnosed back in September with stage 4 lymph node cancer. And I probably said that incorrectly, but luckily he's gone through all the treatment and he's doing absolutely amazing today. Like, it's fantastic. But there was a point where they had an opportunity for a clinical trial. And it's funny because I'm like, I've got so many nurses in my family. Like, seriously, I have several sisters. I have a very large family, in-laws, and crazy. And so were able to support through a lot of this. But they mentioned clinical trial. And I'm like, okay, I'm stepping in now. I want to see that informed consent form. I want to read it. So yes, I 100% agree. If you are not sure, try to find someone. Take your time reading that document. It is very long, but it's important that you really understand. And because, again, it's all about the safety of the individual. So it's so cool. Absolutely. It's so cool how we have similar situations. And I love how you're bringing this stuff up. It's so neat. So, okay. So we've talked about how you got into this position, and you've made this amazing company to help support others. I kind of want to talk about, again, kind of with clinical operations, and we were talking about all these different roles and everything. And you made a comment about being the glue to them. Let's kind of talk about, how, because I agree with you. And I think anyone in clinical research will say clinical operations is really like the biggest chunk or part of it. And then all those other areas feed into it. So let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah, a prior manager of mine had this great metaphor that it just has always stuck with me. He said, clinical operations is a Swiss Army knife. And it is really like you have to be able to do a lot of things pretty well. You're not an expert, though, in any of them, right? And so our role is to make sure the whole study is progressing towards its goals successfully. And so that requires a lot of project management skills as well as people management skills, because in my opinion, the way things get done are through relationships. And so through my programs, that's what I teach. Where can you learn those relationship building skills? Exactly. So you can get things done. And so really the glue is making sure that the teams are supported to deliver whatever it is they're supposed to deliver. So we work closely with everyone internally and externally, including safety, data management, sample management, medical, clinical science, biostats. I mean, you name it. We have our finger on the pulse of everything. And if they have problems, they know we're the first people they should come to, and we're going to advocate for them. We're going to support them. We also manage usually all of the vendors, including the main CRO, if the work is outsourced to a CRO. And so again, relationship building is so important, because if you run trials treating your vendors like they're implementing a to-do list for you, or you're, this bully, I guess, because I've seen that done before. I promise you are not going to have the same results as when you treat them like a partner. And so that is just so important, that there are really candid, streamlined communications internally and externally, so that when you hit challenges, which you will every single day, I mean, that's like the joke in clinical operations. It's like, what fires are we putting out today? What emails are we going to get at? Because when you run a global trial, like I do, you get emails at all hours of the day. And so you start your day and your inbox is full of hundreds of emails. And it's just like, how do you put those fires out? And so that's where, like, again, in like the work that I'm doing through the clinical trial manager, one of the resources I have available is 4 habits of high performing CTMs. One of them is organization. Like, how do you actually manage your email inbox when you get hundreds of emails in the morning, right? And like, how do you actually do that? And I've taught this to so many colleagues that I work with, because we'll be screen sharing and I'll see their inbox and I'm like, how do you sleep at night? Like, there are 300 unread emails. How do you I'm not even trying to make you feel bad. How do you know where to begin? And what I have found is that people don't. And that's where they feel like they're drowning. That's where because in our role, again, when you have to interact with every function, you're basically making sure that no balls are dropped. It can feel like you're drowning if you don't have the right systems in place. And so that's where I've spent a lot of time working with like my direct reports, people I've mentored, of like, here's how you have to set up your systems so that you can be the highest performing clinical trial manager. So then you can just do the day-to-day stuff. If you don't have this foundation, when you get an email from data management that the EDC stopped working, you're going to panic, because it's just another thing on your to-do list, and you're a hamster and you're, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. If you have systems and you know how you're going to be jumping on a call with someone in an hour for a regular one-to-one, and you can brainstorm it there. Like, it just feels good. You feel in control and you feel really confident. And that is what leadership teams want to see. They want to see that people in these roles, which clinical operations is leadership roles, they want to see that people are confident, they can navigate challenges, and that they are reliable through those challenges. And so that is what is so important about, clinical operations, clinical trial managers, is that we keep everyone at equilibrium. We also do really important work with managing up. And so we're often the people providing the updates to the senior leadership team about what's going on in the study. What is the enrollment? What are the risks that we're facing? How are we mitigating those risks? So knowing how to do that is an art form. You cannot just send information to your, top, whatever the title is at your company. And they're going to panic because they think the sky is falling. Like, there is an art to how you communicate with senior leaders, with how you communicate with your team. And I think that's like just the biggest thing I've learned about this role, which is why I love it so much. Because if you find that like this is your jam, like this is where your skill set like is just the strongest, it's for you, and you're going to love showing up every day, and you're not going to get the Sunday scaries like I have in past roles.
Yep. There was a time I cried on Sundays knowing Monday was coming. Not even a joke. And it's a situation I never, ever want to be in again. So when you're passionate about what you do and you're loving what you do. Yeah, I agree. I like what you would call it, the Sunday scaries. Sunday scaries. Oh my gosh. We need to put that on a t-shirt. Let's do it. Like forget the Sunday scaries. Like we love what we do. Oh my gosh. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, this has been such an amazing conversation today, Kristen. Like you have so much information and knowledge. I'm going to have to steal some of this knowledge from you myself because even though I do TMF and not the clinical manager, but you're so full of knowledge. And I love that most importantly, because I'm like this too, that you want to share it because I don't want to be, what do they call it? Like, where you keep it all locked away, share it. Share your experience, share your knowledge. I'm very passionate about that also. Okay. So let's tell our guests how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. So you can find the work that I do with the clinical trial manager. You can find that at theclinicaltrialmanager.com. And also on LinkedIn, you can just search for the clinical trial manager. And I'll have a number of different programs. I have a ton of free content. I have so many ways, whether you're an aspiring clinical trial manager or a current clinical trial manager who's looking to grow. There's just so much there for you. You're going to love it. And then please feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn, Kristen Perkins. And I would love to hear from your audience and see how we can support each other.
So amazing. Well, thank you again so much for being on here today. It has been an amazing conversation, and hopefully I'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, Suzanne. Bye.
This brings us to the end of today's episode. I want to extend my sincere thanks to our guest for sharing their inspiring journey. If you'd like to connect with them, you can find their contact information in the show notes. I also want to express my gratitude to you for joining us on this exploration of the clinical research industry. I hope you found today's episode insightful. If so, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. It truly helps us reach more listeners. If you have any feedback, questions, or comments about the show, feel free to email me at podcast@iceconsultingllc.com. Thank you once again, and I look forward to having you joining us on our next episode of Heart of the Trial.